Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my longtime buddy, Amy Posner. Say hi.
Hey, hey.
It's been ages since we've talked, and we were laughing about that before we started recording, that the last time we saw each other, I'm pretty sure there was probably maybe some wine involved.
I'm pretty certain, considering we go to events where like people spontaneously get married and shit, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, how did I forget about that? That was the first time I sang on stage I never thought I would sing on stage at a business event, but talk about terrifying. I was so afraid that night, and then our friends got married. What?
And you rocked it. I had no idea. Like, I didn't know that side of you. It was like, oh my God, who is this woman? I remember that very
For everybody listening, there was an event back in, 2017? Called Copy Chief Live, hosted by my friend and Amy's friend, Kevin Rogers. It was a gathering of copywriters and people who were really interested in marketing and sales. And Kev puts on a pretty cool event, including this X Factor show where he asked a bunch of us that were musicians and comedians and stuff like that to get up on stage and perform. And let me tell you, I was so nervous. Like I had a band at the time, and Kev knew this. I've performed in front of thousands of people, strangers, empty rooms, full rooms, on a moving train. Like, I've performed in every kind of situation possible. But for some reason, it was, I'm performing in front of colleagues. This is especially terrifying. So I've had like Marcella Allison, who is also a friend of ours, was like, you rocked it that night. And I was like, I was so drunk. I was so drunk. I don't recommend liquid courage to everybody because that's not a way to solve problems. But that is definitely what got me on stage that night. Anyway, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Well, there's a segue for you, huh?
Yeah.
So
smooth.
So I've been pretty much a serial entrepreneur for 30 years. I've worked for myself. And the funny thing is, I never wanted to be a business owner. Right? I grew up in a family business, and I was like, I want to be the creative one. Having no idea that business was super creative and would end up being where I landed. So I've run 6 businesses over that time. A couple of them are still, actually, my first business is still running, still going really strong. I'm not part of it. I sold out of it years ago. Ran an agency that I sold. So I've had some good success. And in the last 10 years or so, I had a copywriting career. That's where we originally overlapped and met. And that kind of morphed into coaching. Partly because, and it's interesting because I did coach copy for a long time. I ran a thing called Copy Clinic. But kind of what happened for me was as I was sort of working with more freelancers and coaching people, and you've seen this, I know, it's like the people who are really good at their craft but don't have any business chops just don't eat well. They're constantly up against feast and famine. And like the mediocre practitioners who know how to run a business make a whole lot more money. And it was driving me crazy. You know, it's like you have these really great people who go into business because they're great at something and they love it. And then they burn out on it because of feast and famine. And so I started leaning really heavily into coaching the business skills, and running masterminds and group programs. And that's now morphed into, I do some coaching still. But what I did was I digitized everything that I knew and kind of created like an off the shelf mastermind. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I am right now. I'm like in this business. I've been around for a long time. I'm swimming in totally new waters and I don't know the strokes, and it's very interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm making notes and I have so many things I want to circle back to, but I wanted to highlight the thing that you said about people who are really good at their craft who tend to suck at business. And I've noticed this pattern too. So for anybody listening out here who has, and tell me if you have felt this feeling before, because I certainly have, thinking, Jesus, why is this so hard? Like, I thought I was a good writer, but this just seems to be beating me up. I don't know if I have it in me to figure this out. Maybe it's easier if I just go get a job. Like, Amy's giving me the thumbs up on that one. That is a skills gap, like Amy so accurately pegged. It is, you're good at your craft, but you need to learn the business skills. And that includes money management, client management, time management, whole bunch of stuff that comes along with this, creative endeavor. Make your own way, live your life by the beach, whatever hours you want to work, right? We've all been sold the dream. It's a lot harder than it looks, but it can be done if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the things that's so interesting about it too, is I think like the business stuff isn't sexy, right? Like who wants to learn about finance and write proposals and, all of this stuff? It's just, and I think there's also like, there's the sales myth. Like people think, oh, if I have to convince people of something or talk them into it, when there's like none of that at all in an actually a good sales, meeting or conversation. So I think a lot of it is people just feel like, oh, I don't want to learn that. Like, I don't want to be creepy, pushy, manipulative, in your face, all these things that they perceive they might become, if they learn the business skills. And so I'm doing my best to make it really accessible and go like, no, I'm really scrappy. Like, all right, I'm not an MBA. I'm not like all formal. It's like, let me show you how to do this in a way that's going to work in the world that you move in. And like, let's just give you these things so that you can actually like prosper instead of, constantly wondering like, am I out of my mind? Did I make a mistake? Like, is it me? Because everyone says it's so easy and all the things you've just said. And like, no, it's not. It's never been easy.
I love that you said that business stuff isn't sexy. Like these business skills really are not. I coached for a friend's program for quite some time where it was that we were teaching the business side of things, specifically of freelance copywriting, and we positioned it as one person agency. And all this was about figuring out what you want out of this business, what your specialty is, who you work with, what kind of level they're at, how you can support them. And there were so many things that like I remember getting wrong when I was early in my career that I didn't understand about business, that it's so critical to talk about these things. I would see people saying, and this is no judgment if this is where you're at, this is where we all start, right? You have to learn. They go, I want a $5,000 a month retainer. And I'm like, great, who are you going for? And they're like, these are small business owners and they are making $50,000 to like $150,000 a year. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do some math. How much are they making a month? Oh, suddenly we start to see that this math doesn't work. Maybe we need to either adjust your retainer or we need to adjust your targeting. You need a bigger business or you need a smaller retainer, but you're not going to get $5,000 out of it. You can't get blood out of a turnip. It's not going to happen. And the unit that I taught specifically was client management, which my friend Chris Orzakowski knows that I'm pretty good at. I communicate pretty well with people, hence having a podcast here. But I was consistently surprised by how many times our coaching calls would run like 2-3 hours as all these students are just throwing scenarios at me. Okay, my client was late getting me this thing and now the whole project's running behind and they're mad. How would I handle that? We can't kick this project off because they haven't got me the contract or the payment. How do I handle that? And I would just come up with scripts on the fly and be like, we don't have to take these things personally. We don't have to, they're often not personal. If somebody's late on an invoice, it's not usually because they're going, how can I scheme this person? I can't wait to screw them over and get things for free. I mean, there are some folks out there like that, but you get burned once or twice and you learn what hot means and you learn how to recognize that the stove is looking a little red right now. Maybe get away from that.
Exactly. And like some of those things, and it from, you're naturally good at it. You're a people person, right? So these things.
Oh, I had to learn this.
Oh, you did in the business context? Was it not natural for you?
Yes, it was not natural for me at all. Like a lot of the people skills are very, very much a learned skill for me, but I'll say your point and then I'll continue on that.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because people often see clients as adversaries, right? Instead of potential partners. And so I think that's where this whole little thing sort of gets knotted up and gets started where, it's like the freelancer goes almost like hat in hand, like, oh, like, am I good enough? Would you hire me? Could I work on your project? When really, that first of all, that's not going to impress the client. But second of all, that's not the situation. It's like, you have a skill, they have a problem, is your skill the solution to that problem? So A, is there fit? And B, like, do you want fit? Do you want to solve this problem? Do you want to work with this person? I don't want to work with everyone. I don't want to solve everyone's problems. I just don't, right? I think most of us don't. So
period. underline, circle, amen. Do I want to work with this person is a totally valid question.
Yeah. And it's one you should be asking. And you can see where like you come from a place of more confidence asking that question, right? Like rather than, oh, like, would you deign to work with me and maybe accept? No. It's like, hey, I've got the skills. And even when you're new, I mean, you're valid in what you know. And ideally, you know more than the client does, even if it's just a teeny little bit. You're the expert.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I fell into that delusion for a long time of thinking that I had to be like the utmost expert in order to earn their respect. I've told this story, I think, a couple of times in different places, but the first time I was asked to break down copy on stage, I spent weeks studying like the most advanced launch strategy hit. I was convinced that somebody was going to try and throw me a curveball, and I was prepared. And so imagine me on stage when I'm like, bring it on. Your best shot. I'm prepared to answer any marketing question you have, no matter how advanced. And all of the questions were marketing 101. All like very, very basic marketing stuff, but you're so close to it, especially when it's just you, a solo practitioner, or you're in that messy growth stage where everybody is swamped and you just don't see little things like, nowhere on this page did you tell me what your business actually is. That would be helpful. It's a very pretty graphic. But I don't know what you do. And then they came to the back table and told me, oh my gosh, how did I not see that? You're a genius. And I went, wow. I thought this was going to be so much harder than it was, but most people are struggling with the same basic problems. And once you see the patterns, it's very easy for you to solve.
It is. And it's interesting because there's the same patterns. And it's like the two things you said, it's like, well, this and that has happened with a client. How do I untangle it? This and that has happened. Mm-hmm. And I think what people forget, it's like, well, what do you do in your like regular life? Right? These are just people, right? Like mm-hmm. What do you do when you have an issue with your partner or your best friend or your mom? You know, how do you handle it? How do you talk to them? It's like, it's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing, but you have to see yourself as, you know, sort of deserving, for lack of a better word. And I think that's kind of an issue for people. It's like, am I good enough to, do I have the confidence? Do I deserve to? And so I think, you know, the mindset stuff is a whole other piece that just smacks right up into this. I feel like the second you decide you're going to start a business, it's like, you know, all your confidence just goes like shaking to the ground, like you're all gung ho. And it's like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, who am I to? And like, we all run into that. And now you've got to solve that problem. Oh yeah.
Nobody told me when I signed up for business that I was signing up for like 80% self-development, 20% business. You come face to face with yourself, good, bad, and ugly real quick when you start a business. Oh my gosh. But I agree with you when you talk about there's this kind of pervasive like, especially in the direct response, like the more sales oriented, woohoo, this launch made $2 million. There can be a clients as an adversary undercurrent, even if people don't say that they're the enemy. And I see this happening all the time with, well, like I made this recommendation and the client disagreed with it. How freaking stupid are they? Blah, 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 blah. And I got really known in certain copywriting groups for coming in and kind of toning down the pitchfork mob and being like, okay, well, you're an expert in marketing and your perspective is valid. And they're an expert in their business and their perspective is valid. And they're taking on you as a risk and a cost. So I think that's a position that deserves respect. I don't think that's stupid at all. And suddenly, you know, there were some people that like doubled down and they're like, what the hell do you know? I'm like, okay, cool, that's fair. But then other people that were watching got it and suddenly realized like, okay, when we respect each other and we work together to solve a problem, that's much better than me coming in, swinging things around and going, pay attention to me. I am the expert. Raw.
Yeah. And I think, and it's funny because I think the less expert you are, the more likely you are to have that position or feel delusional, right? Or feel delusional. It is delusional, whatever. I think that it's funny, like the more seasoned you are, the sort of the more humble you are, because you realize it's so funny. Like at the early stages, you're like, you know, people are talking about things. And like you said, like, you don't know what that is, but they don't have, because they think, oh, I'm supposed to know. Like you're busy like Googling, like, what is that acronym? Well, it's like some internal thing that they don't expect you to know, but you feel like you should know. So you don't ask, or they're talking about something they've done. And the thing is, you realize later, of course, is like the more questions you ask, the more of an expert you look like, because you need to dig down, right? Nothing or rarely is anything like what the client presents is the thing that they need or the solution to the problem. It often needs to be talked about. So you need to learn how to ask questions and probe and find out what's really going on. And I think I think in the early stages, you don't realize that. And I think that just that one thing, learning to ask questions can like change the whole positioning of how you're seen.
Oh, absolutely. I can't remember where I heard it, but I've heard it a couple of times that said that basically people will easily perceive you as an expert if you know how to ask good questions that make them think. And I have talked about that with clients and with the courses that I've taught about, I see it almost as client inception. If I present an idea and they kind of resist it, then I will start a sequence of questions that gets them to rethink the choice they've made. And eventually they usually come back around and suggest the thing that I suggested. And I go, that's a fantastic idea. As I wanted to proceed without us ever having to fight each other, because I just wanted them to see where I was coming from. And if they overruled me, cool. They're paying me to do a job. And we may not agree on that, but I need to do the job because that's what they're paying me to do. It's okay.
Yeah. And our job is to make their lives easier. Right. It's not to be a pain in the ass. It's not to challenge them. And sometimes they are wrong. That's their prerogative. They're paying the bill. Right. They find out.
And sometimes I'm wrong too.
Right. No, we can't.
I want just as much grace whenever I'm wrong as I want to give them. Yep.
Yeah. And I think, it's an interesting thing that because you're getting inside someone's business. And for those of us who run businesses, that's our baby. Right. I mean, this is especially the smaller businesses, or if you're a solo, I mean, this is very, very freaking personal. And there's even some sense of I don't know, proprietariness, right? It's I hired you, but I don't really want you to tell me everything, right? I want it to be a little more gentle, or a little more of a partnership. And so you have to be really careful as the contractor, right? Because again, I think it's our job to make their job easier and to kind of help interpret what's going to work. But you got to be really gentle, because this is their baby. It just is. That's the only way I can put it. It's really personal.
Yeah, I like that reframe, because especially if you're in the newer or the growth stage, if you start to treat people's businesses like this is their baby, I wouldn't just come in steal their baby away and run it over here because I think we need to be at the park right now. You're going to have the cops called on you. You're going to be arrested real quick. Don't do that. But if you talk to them and be like, hey, do you want to walk to the park? Let's go to the park together. Maybe the baby can get some sunshine. You and I could talk business, right? That's a much better way. And it's so funny. I want to circle back to you. You seemed surprised when I mentioned that I was not always good at people. You said that I was a natural. And that seems like a conversation that's come up a couple of times recently, because I have also had somebody say that I was very, very confident and that I always spoke my mind and I would not let people walk all over me. And I said, that's because I used to be a doormat. I was every single thing that I now know how to do is a learned response based on how I used to behave. This is very tied into the evolution that we were talking about of becoming a business owner. You learn how to be better, you learn how to put certain safeguards in place, or you just don't move forward. You stay stuck in the place that you are until you learn the thing you need to learn. So, doing what other people told me is basically my repeat pattern that shows up over and over and over again. And I talked about this recently on the podcast too. It even showed up in me trying a whole bunch of different things in my own business, because every time I would come up with an idea that lit me up and filled me with joy, I'd run it by my mentors and they'd go, I don't think this is a good idea. And here's all the reasons why. And I didn't trust myself. I trusted them to know better than me. So I would follow what they told me to do, and I would struggle and I would feel miserable. And I didn't understand why these things were working. These things weren't working because I was trying to build somebody else's business.
So
it worked when I followed my own vision, even when it didn't make sense to other people. I actually had a mentor tell me my first idea for an event was, it came on the heels of my travel. I spent a couple years as a digital nomad. Somebody came to visit me in Savannah, Georgia. We had this giant 2-story porch with the columns and the fans, and we spent most of our time out there writing. And this person idly comments at the end of 5 days, I've gotten more work done on this front porch in the last 5 days than I've done at home in probably the last 5 months. And I went, aha, there's something to this, change of scenery, change of pace. Maybe we can do something. And I said, a lot of people have been telling me that they'd love to go on adventures with me. And now I have this person saying they got a lot of work done with me. Maybe I can create an event where we can combine the both. We do some adventures, we get some work done, everybody wins. I'm very excited. I run this by my mentor. And this person was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. And I was like, crush my soul. Why don't you?
And have you gone ahead and done it?
I actually did go ahead and do it despite that. And I think that was just the sign to me that I was no longer in the right space in terms of mentorship, because, and this is something you learn in business too, that you eventually outgrow your mentors, which can be very sad in and of itself, where you're like, I thought I was going to go forever with this person and they were going to be my person that just helped me build my business forever. But some people are going to pop into your life and help you get to a certain level, and then you're going to need somebody else to help you get to the next place, or you change directions entirely and you don't work in that field anymore, so it doesn't make sense to work together anymore. So that was another real hard lesson too, where it was like, no, I disagree. I think that this is going to work. I think there's something to this, and I'm going to pursue this. And that led to my event, Eat, Play, Launch, where the very first one was in Vegas, and we drove bulldozers, and it was fantastic.
Oh, this is ringing a bell. I've read about this now. Okay. When was this?
This was April of 2022. So there have been 3 so far, and they've all been fairly small and like invite only, because we haven't had to advertise to the public yet. There's not one planned for 2024 just yet, but I will keep you posted.
Oh, very cool. So let me ask you, so in this, because I think this is really interesting, like when people say yes and when people say no, like your trusted mentors or colleagues. So how do people break out of that? Like, when do you know when your idea is right and somebody else is wrong? Like, is it for you, is it like gut? Is it experience? Like you've done it enough now, or had people say no to things that are so uniquely you? I'm like, how does that work for you? I'm really curious.
That's a great question. I think this is the first time I'm really articulating this. So it's going to be on the fly, and it's probably going to be a bit rough. I would say it probably was a little bit gut instinct, because something in me woke up in that moment and said, hey, wait a minute, I'm really excited about this. And it feels like, instead of asking me how we could make this happen, what would need to happen, right? That's the line of questioning I would take a client down to lead to this clientception, right? If I think that what they're doing is not going to be productive, then I will ask them a series of questions that will help them decide whether this is a good decision or not. But so I think part of me rebelled against being told this is not a good idea. I think part of me rebelled against, like, why can't we figure out what would make this a worthwhile idea instead of just stomping all over it? And then there was another third, like, deeper part of me that went, enough. I've followed what everybody else told me to do for years and years and years, and it didn't work out the way they said it would. Why don't I do what I think should be done and figure things out from there? So yeah, I think that was all the conversation that was happening kind of in an unconscious level that led me to go, I'm going to figure out how to do this.
And do you think, like, is it based on like you've had successes sort of being, I don't know, out of the box, or like not following what people said, and so you kind of said, well, hell, it's working for me, or I know myself better, or?
Yeah, that. And I think, and I feel like a lot of podcast guests have identified with this in the past too. A lot of us come from that kind of exceptional student background, like overachiever. We were really naturally good at certain things, especially in school. And then we got into the working world and got a little bit surprised by, it's a little bit harder than that, right? And then you get into business and you're constantly told that, like, you have to work hard, you have to hustle and grind, and there's all of these things that go into running a business. Yes. And once you have figured out how to make your finances work, your offers work, things like that, you can construct things in a way to where the work is easy and enjoyable for you. That doesn't mean that business is always going to be smooth sailing, and I think that's the thing I didn't get for a long time until somebody saw me editing something live as a copywriter. And she goes, I just watched you do that, but I have no idea. What kind of magic did you just do? I don't know how you changed 2 sentences and changed this whole email. And I was like, oh, I thought everybody knew how to do this. And it turns out a lot of other people struggle to do what I do very easily. And I think that's true for almost every industry out there. I've met some people who are whizzes at technology, and they start talking about tagging and list cleaning, and I start going, oh, panic. No, I don't need to know anybody.
Please, you do that for me, okay? Yes.
I all but hide every time I get an email from one of my bookkeepers and accountants. And I know it's probably going to be like 10 minutes of me looking at books on my end, but I'm like, numbers, no.
Yeah, me too. Like, no, somebody else. And my story for a long time was I'm really good at making money, but not good at managing it, which isn't exactly true, but I guess I just don't like it. It doesn't, I like money, but I don't like that stuff. I don't like getting into all the details. And it's a little, sometimes I feel a little embarrassed about that, like as a business owner and a coach who teaches business
Mhm.
stuff, but it's like, no, I don't like it. I don't need to do it. You don't need to do what you don't like.
I think that is something that's kind of dismissed a lot. Like money is inherently uncomfortable to talk about for a lot of folks. For some folks, it comes very easily, but for other folks, especially those that have some sort of trauma in their past or they haven't trusted themselves with how to handle money, that becomes something tricky to talk about. So like when you get somebody all up in your face about, you got to talk about money. Yes. And like being all in my face isn't going to make me want to have this conversation anymore. Actually, before the recording, we were having a talk about having, downturns over the last couple of years and how there were some difficulties. I heard this across the board in a lot of small businesses that 2023 was a struggle. And I remember going to my accountant on a quarter when I was going to take a loss. Like, there's no way around this. I'm in the negative for this quarter, and I'm just so full of shame going into this call. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to be on this call. I don't want to share this news, as if they didn't already know it because my accounts are connected and they could see all of this happening in real time, but I just don't want to face the music, right? And what I loved about them was they came to this call and they went, it happens. You're smart. Look at your track record. Look at everything that you've built. You'll get it back. This is a rough patch. We have all the faith in you. We're here to handle the numbers and help you get better at keeping that money. You're out there doing the business and the hard work. It's going to be okay. And I was like, okay, thank you. And sure enough, they were right. Turned it around, managed to make some offers and some sales, and things are trending up. It's fantastic.
I love the accountant/therapist.
Me too. That seems to be who I need to work with.
That's very cool. It's like, oh, extra service. Okay, thank you.
Part accountability, part therapy, and then, just a good buddy we could go have a drink with. This is who I like to work with, at least.
Yeah, me too. It's good though. You don't expect that from your accountant necessarily. Anyway.
No,
yeah.
Not at all. Well, hey, we broached the topic. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's mostly personal. It's funny because a lot of my clients were taking a business hit, and I had decided to take a business hit. So what happened is my brother died in October of 2022, and it was totally unexpected. And the grief just shriveled me. I mean, it really hit me hard. And I just sort of was at a capacity. And so what I decided was, okay, no, I'm going to step back and do something I've wanted to do for a long time and haven't done properly. I'm going to build this program that I wanted to build, and I'm going to hire someone to help me because I built it before and I just wasn't proud of it. So I never put it out in the world. And so it just seemed like a really good time to invest in myself. But here's the funny thing. Talking about money, I never did that before. I've invested in my business, obviously, and in myself, but I've never said, you know what, I'm not going to work. I'm not going to worry about income. I'm going to finance this next iteration or this next chapter.
Oh, wow.
And that's what I had decided to do. So I was already I was sort of already expecting that. So it wasn't, that wasn't challenging for me. I mean, what was challenging was then my chiropractor got murdered. Then a really good friend had a heart attack. And then I had a breast cancer scare that took a month to get the results of. So It was just a lot of things at once. And so that was my hardship. It was the first time in my life really that I couldn't work at the capacity that I wanted to work at. I've always had a lot of capacity. I have a lot of energy. And I was just like, you know what, I'm out. I especially don't have it for other people because I really like to give when I work with people, but you can't give if you don't have to give. You just can't, right? And so I've never been up against that before, and I was up against it. And I thought, okay, and I mean, I'm obviously not a kid either. I've been around for a while. So it's like, okay, can I take another hit like this? What if, who knows what life is going to bring me? So maybe I really need to rethink my business model and have it not be so dependent on me, and me being, there, in real time. So that's why I made the pivot that I did. And it's been interesting because, of course, I've been coaching people, and I kept a little handful of one-on-one clients. And what I've seen is extremes, either they're rolling in way too much work and they're wondering who do they take on and how do they manage it? or they're over here going, I've had like an abundance of work for 2 or 3 years and now the well is dry and I have no clue what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see anything in between. There weren't a whole lot of people who were just rolling along on their normal path, right? It felt like it was either feast or famine. Yeah. So it's just been a really, I mean, and on the heels of the pandemic and our lives have changed because of that. And I don't think we've all really kind of taken that in because there's so much going on and the world's a mess. And so like, it's a challenging time, on top of being a tough economic time.
It is a very challenging time. And that's, I mean, wow. I mean, so much, all of my love to you, because I definitely feel that feel. When are the hits going to stop? When am I going to have some breathing room? Oh my goodness. To have all of that happen in such short order. How did you find your way through that? I know that you mentioned a little bit, I'm going to take on this next bit of building by yourself, but what did that look like? I'm curious.
So I have I don't know what to call her. She calls herself my chief wrangler. So I have somebody who runs alongside me. And so luckily I had her, and we've been together for a couple of years now in business. So she knows me and knows what to do well enough that she could kind of fill in some things for me. So I had that. And just turned out to be really wonderful support, like above and beyond. So that was great. And I hired an instructional designer. I mean, I hired someone to actually help me figure out, because I think I'm pretty good at teaching people or helping people. What I'm not good is knowing how, like, I don't know how to get what is out of my head into a format that you can use, because I either do way too much or way too little. Right. My old style was like back up the information, dump truck me like in here. I'll give you as much as I possibly can. Then I realized, no, people can't work with that. But then I went a little shorthand. And it's like, no, that's not quite enough. So I didn't trust myself to know to have a real learning path for people and to make it super accessible. So anyway, that's what I set out to do. We thought it would take 6 months. It took 9 months. And then I realized it was so funny because I got that done. And it was like, oh, wait. My website's a copywriter website.
Yeah.
And a coaching website. Didn't think of this. So then I did a website and a rebrand. Then it's like, okay, now I'm in the selling things business. So I got to clean up my back end and I got to get my automations right. And like, why are people coming? Why is that door open? Why is that door open? Like, how did these links, So it's like, someone download a lead magnet I was offering 4 years ago. It's like, where did you find that? That kind of thing. So that led to a whole tightening up of the back end and cleaning things. And so here I am, I'm all sparkly, clean and ready. And I'm like, what do I do every day?
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I feel the same way in terms of my capabilities as a teacher. I feel like I'm really good at teaching somebody as long as they bring me a specific problem that I can solve. But like, if I have to sit down and figure out, okay, this is like the whole landscape of things that I could work with, and these are all the problems that I could solve, then I start to get overwhelmed. And I think the first time I tried to teach somebody how I think through launch strategy, I literally watched like the deer in the headlight look pop up on people's faces, and then went, I'm backing that dump truck up. I'm burying them alive. They are panicking. I don't know how to stop this. So what I'm hearing is I need to hire an instructional designer too.
It was kind of amazing. It was like, it actually felt like magic, because we do these long sessions and then he would come up with, like sort of what, like the key points. And then I would flesh them out. And we ended up developing a working process, but I felt like I finally found someone who could get into my head and like extricate the stuff somehow. I don't know what that takes. I have no idea like why he's good at it and why we were a fit, but it worked.
I think a lot of us are good at that to a certain extent, and like in certain fields, because I remember a while back wanting to get on in more media and pitch more articles, but it's the same thing where I sit and think about everything that I could potentially speak to and all the stories I've accumulated over and all the publications that are out there and getting the information for the editors. Then it becomes overwhelming. And so I paid my media coach for like an hour of her time and said, here's what I'm working on. Here's some things that have been happening. And I was just waiting for her to go, ooh, tell me more. And then I'm going, okay, cool, there's a story. And by the end of this hour, she had pulled like 12 to 15 stories out of me. And she'd also said, this would be good for this publication. This would be good for that publication. It's how I got an article into Huffington Post last year. Like, she basically spoon fed me that this would be a good article for Huffington Post. You should talk to this person. Here's how. Right. And I was totally oblivious to the fact that that is exactly what I do for my strategy clients. Like I sit there and pull this out of them and reflect. I call it reflecting their awesomeness back at them, because we are totally not objective when it comes to seeing how awesome we are. It kind of goes back to like making things harder on ourselves and not letting it be easy when it's something that we couldn't naturally do. But I get to listen to people and ask them questions about their business. And then when they get like good and ranty, or they get impassioned, or they go, oh my God, this is my favorite client ever. I go, story, 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 story. All right, cool. Here's how that launch flows. And it's fantastic. It's the best feeling ever to solve a problem like that just by talking it out.
It's so good. And I just flashed on, I just remember talking to you in a hallway at an event, and you were just starting a kind of coaching where like people could bring you anything. Mm-hmm. And it could be a one-off. And I was like, and it's interesting because like talking about like you doing you and your ideas. And I remember thinking, that's freaking brilliant. I know. I mean, I never had heard of it. And I offer something like that now, totally inspired by you. But I remember thinking just thinking how smart that was. And just, I don't know, this is like, I'm kind of bringing that circle back. You've always struck me as someone who's very, I want to say uniquely you, but like someone who does follow their own ideas.
It's taken a lot to get here. And it's so funny to me. Well, because of course I have to be in my head. You guys don't have to be in here with me. And trust me, you don't want to be. It's a scary place in between my ears sometimes. That's the creative imagination at work there. But it's been a lot of work to get to that point, and to know that it appears that way, even though it hasn't always felt that way. It means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I just flashed on. I can remember like distinctly like coming around a corner and seeing you and having this conversation and hearing about that and going, yeah, just sort of being mind blown. Anyway.
Yeah, that was one of those, like, I know that a lot of people want to work with me on stuff, and I know that they have a lot of things that they can work on and a lot of problems I can solve. And like a lot of multi-talented, multi-passionate people, we struggle to go, this is the problem that I solve for the person that I solve it for.
Yes.
Yes, and here are all the little sandboxes I like to play in. Okay, that's fine. I'm a little ADHD. Sue me.
And at the time, you had a full-time job, and I remember thinking, like, okay, you're doing this and you're doing that, and you had a pretty responsible full-time job from what I could see on the outside. Mm-hmm. It was like you were really running the show, and it's like, and she's coaching, and she's doing. It's like, yeah, you've always been impressive.
Well, I didn't bring you on the show to be all like, here's why Angie's awesome.
Oh, no, you're going to pay me after, right?
Oh, yes. Okay, sure. We didn't talk about that.
Right.
This is fantastic. Okay, so you've hired the instructional designer. We've been building this comeback from this really, really awful, terrible year. Rest in peace to your brother. How are things going now? How's it looking? Are you excited?
Yeah, so things are looking great. I just launched a new website, and it's funny. I feel like I've moved out of a dorm room into a luxury hotel. I do. I didn't realize how self-conscious I felt. It's like, oh, everything's neat here, and as a place. So I'm really excited about that. We've been doing all of these things to sort of get our house in order, and now we're like ready to sort of do the work that we need to do. So I feel very excited. I feel a little bit. I wouldn't say out of my league, because I think I can get this in my league, but I feel like I've got a new challenge that I need to solve, and I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to solve it. Although I'm really grateful to some of the things you've said, because I have some ideas and they're really different from the mainstream ideas. And I'm like, and they're very me. And that's always worked for me too, right? Like I launched my copy business with a lumpy mail package, right? Like,
yes.
Like who does that? But so anyway, you've like sort of given me a little bit of, I don't know, impetus to say like, you know what?
Yay.
I think maybe I need to bring a little bit of my own little spice here.
Absolutely. That's so funny. I get so up in arms when people talk about like what's working, best practices. I want to do what somebody else is doing. Like to me, that's the mark of somebody that's not a good fit for me. How are you going to stand out if you are deliberately following the herd? That is not standing out. That is blending in. And the whole reason that everybody follows trends is because somebody was brave enough, like you, to go, well, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. I think that's wonderful. Wonderful.
I do too. And I think, the problem I think too with following the trends or following other people is you really don't know what they've done. You only know what you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, oh, well, there's Angie and overnight success. It's like, yeah, plus 12 years or what, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever. I mean, you just don't know. And so I think that whole idea of, I don't know, and like, yeah, it's great to emulate people and it's great to learn from people, but like, you really need to know what you're dealing with. Right. Because you just don't know. You have no idea.
And to know why you're doing something. Like if you like the idea behind what somebody is doing and you want to make that your own, cool, make that your own, but don't give away your power by going, well, this, like I did, this person knows better than me, so I should just do what they say. That is building your business for somebody else. It may or may not work for you. And I think that's where a lot of these kind of gurus get themselves in trouble with unsatisfied customers. They only know the way that works for them to build a business. They haven't explored other ways. And I think that's what makes you an effective coach. And I like to think that's what makes me an effective coach. I can see across industries to higher level trends and things that work because this is something that just works for creative service businesses. This is something that works for service businesses in general, right? And these can apply to all of these different things versus there is one way to do it. And if you do not do this, something is wrong with you. I hate that messaging and I hope it dies in a fire.
And the problem with that one trick pony business is like, you haven't shown anyone else to do it, right? It's like, so you've done it and it was great for you, but like, unless you can show me you've, taught that to a bunch of other people who can also do that and it works for them, then why would I do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do I know it's not uniquely you and I can't emulate that? It just doesn't make sense.
Amen. Amen. Like my favorite drum to beat lately is that there's 100 different ways to solve any given problem. And a whole bunch of those solutions could actually all work. And so I'm tired of this dynamic of where there's one solution, there's one best solution. Maybe, maybe not, right? You'd probably appreciate this because we touched on sales sucks and head trash earlier at the beginning. And I made a note to circle back and I almost forgot. So I'm glad we're coming full circle. I had some head trash around not being good at sales too. And I think this came in the past from feeling like I had to be some slick, polished salesperson that could just like pivot smoothly and be like, by the way, I have a perfect service for that. It turns out I didn't have to do that. I recently had a couple of sales wins for my business, and that was new for me because I worked for these big teams. I was referral only for a long time. I didn't develop those sales skills, and I felt frankly very uncomfortable putting myself out there and making offers. And then my coach, hi, Ron, said something brilliant. Lean into the discomfort. Like practice your pitch a couple minutes each day, like talk about who you're for and what problems you like to solve, just casually out loud to yourself so that you get comfortable saying this. And then just lean into the awkwardness. And the funny thing is, I had a sale a couple weeks ago that like, this is a stranger. I'm meeting her for the first time. She was introduced by a colleague, closed the sale in 15 minutes because we were just vibing. We're on the same page. And I was like, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm not the greatest, most polished salesperson on the planet, but I don't give a damn about that. I give a damn about being good at marketing. And I assure you, I'm really, really good at that. And just leading into that awkwardness made her go, yep, you're my person. Cool. Send the contract. We're done.
Yes. And I love that. And, it's like, I love like transparency around awkwardness because what happens is it's like, Angie, like, I feel really uncomfortable, but I got to ask you this thing. Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to feel like a little warmer toward me. Like, oh, don't feel uncomfortable with me. Like, come here. Like, what's up? Right. Like, it just puts you in a more, I don't know, in a more open position. And now it's like on the table that I feel awkward. So instead of like, if I act awkward, you might just think I'm like a weirdo or I'm not good at what I do. But if I've just told you I'm awkward, mm-hmm. Well, I might still be a weirdo, but I might still be good at what I do, right?
And I can still be really freaking good at what I do and not be the strongest salesperson. Those two things can be simultaneously true, and I can still build a good business off the back of that. This all ties back in beautifully to this like being yourself, just owning that, trying new things. I love it.
And also being willing to be bad at something to be good at it. Like we so desperately, me included, I so desperately want to be good at something that it's like, it's hard. I get impatient. Like, I don't want to be bad at it. So I don't do it. And it's like, it's okay. It's really okay. Like you can't get better unless you get at it.
Definitely. I want to be better at running. I need to run a 7-minute mile tomorrow, even though I haven't run in 20 years. I'm going to start working out. I need to go lift 500 pounds tomorrow. Like, yeah, those unrealistic expectations we set for ourselves. That's the root of a lot of the suffering. It's going to be messy. It's going to be ugly. It's going to suck.
It's like when people come to me and they say, well, I want to make 10K a month, I'm like, and I'm just starting a business and I've had a job. And it's like, well, have you made 10K a month in your job? No.
All right. We've got some unpacking.
Right. But like, it's like you don't have experience doing that. So like, we need to like unpack like the whole, anyway, it's just, it's so interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I love this.
Yeah, I do too.
Thankfully, I'm so grateful. And it sounds like you share this trait too, to be like, okay, why am I thinking that? Why am I behaving this way? Why are you behaving this way? I get curious instead of going, well, that's freaking weird. I never want to talk to them again.
No. And well, I kind of like the weirdos though, personally.
Me too.
I do. I know.
Oh, me too. Weirdos are my people. They make life way interesting. And if you want to be like a normal alpha, whatever, boring snooze, cool, go run with your crew. I don't care.
Right. There's a bar for you too.
Yep, exactly. There's a bar for all of us. Just don't come to our weirdo bar. On that note, I'm going to keep going for like 2 more hours if you let me, but we're running up against time. I want to tell us more about your business. How can we learn about this shiny new website and how to work with you?
Well, so your listeners can go. I will have a amypod.co/permission to kick ass.
Ooh.
And I will have some things set up for you there. But at my website, amyposner.com, I've got a free course called Breakthrough Clients. And it's really good for people who are trying to figure out like, who's my client? Who should I be going after? Who should I be talking to? It's funny. This is like a little sideways, but when I started my business, when I started my copy business, I didn't know who bought what I sold. Right? I was like, why do some people buy a sales letter for $2,500 and some people are paying $25,000? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it the client? Is it the contractor? Is it the project? So I was really trying to untangle all of that stuff. And what I've come to understand is like, you have to be serving the right people for you, which of course, and you really need to go through the process of figuring it out. Because and I think you said it earlier, it's like when you're trying to make the wrong offer to the right people or the other way around, it's like it doesn't sell and you think it's you. Mm-hmm. When you suddenly are solving the right problems for the right people, it's like, oh, your dance card fills up. People want projects. Yes. Things are happening. And so anyway, that's the thing I have at the site that's free. I do a weekly newsletter that it's like your little dose of entrepreneurial intelligence for your week. And things to think about. And and I'm on LinkedIn. I hang out, I answer questions. I try to be, I'm trying to like get known and be accessible. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I think we can help with that with this show for sure.
Yay.
A little happy dance.
I'm doing a little happy dance here. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show. This just made my heart happy. What a way to end my recording day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.